Hey guys, so I'm going to show you how I make a broccoli and mushroom stuffed spaghetti squash. And you guys are going to watch me struggle to cut this one open because I have a awful knife and a equally terrible cutting board. Make sure you have a nice steady cutting board and a nice sharp knife. Okay guys, so this is what it looks like on the inside once it's split open. We're going to get a spoon and we're going to scoop out all of the seeds and the membranes out of the middle. You can pick the seeds out and roast them like you would pumpkin seeds, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'm actually just going to take these out to the yard to the compost pile, or like I like to call it is Mr. Bunny Rabbit's food pile, because he comes and eats all of the compost. So sometimes they're hard to kind of scoop out, but you want to get as much of the membrane out of here as you can. Don't do what I did right there and scoop out like half of the squash. Okay, so now we're just going to season with some salt and pepper and some olive oil. So we're going to drizzle these with olive oil. We're going to use enough that we can coat the whole entire get the back side as well. And then we're going to lay this cut side down. And I'm going to go wash my hands. Alright guys, so I've preheated my oven to 400 degrees and I'm going to go ahead and slide the spaghetti squash into the oven. And we're going to bake this for about an hour. You can check it after about 45 minutes. Just be careful because you don't want the outside skin to burn. Alright guys, while the squash is in the oven cooking, I'm going to show you how I make the filling. So we're going to use some onion, some broccoli, and some baby bella mushrooms. So we are going to chop up this onion. I'm going to hold on to that. This sounds silly, but I'm going to go ahead and try to grow my own onions. So I'm going to start that as a starter. So this recipe is easily adaptable. You can use anything, any vegetables you like, anything you have on hand. If you got some asparagus, that'd probably be really good in here too. Some peppers. You can use any kind of mushrooms that you have, white button mushrooms or shiitake mushrooms. Even something like shaved Brussels sprouts would probably be good. So I'm going to go ahead. I've already washed these. And these actually I need to use these up because they are like right on their last legs here. So I was trying to come up with a recipe that I could use up a bunch of vegetables, especially these mushrooms, because I knew they were going to go bad soon if I didn't use them up. You don't have to take the stems off. That's just my preference for this recipe. And really just because these mushrooms, like I said, are kind of on their last legs. So the stems just weren't looking too hot. So I went ahead and pulled those out. But you can leave them in if your mushrooms look better than my mushrooms do. And you can chop these as big as you like as well. You can just leave them in slices. But I'm kind of just chunking them up into like bite-sized pieces. Make some room here. If you don't have mushrooms, you don't have to use mushrooms. If you don't like mushrooms, don't use mushrooms. It's, you know, like I said, this is a very easily adaptable recipe. You can use any vegetables that you like. Anything really would work in this recipe. Alright. So now we're going to move on to the broccoli. I'm going to cut these really small. Again, you can leave them bigger if you want bigger, if you like the stems. Normally I would leave the stems on for like other kinds of recipes, but for this recipe I kind of like just the florets, and I like them to be really small. I feel like they cook up a lot easier that way. I'm not big on like super crunchy broccoli in this recipe, so I like it to be tender but not overcooked. I don't want mushy broccoli, but I want it to be tender. So that's why I take the stems off. And these will go out to the bunny rabbit anyway. Get my big skillet out here. I'm gonna put this on like medium high. And then I'm gonna use I don't know, about a tablespoon and a half, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You don't need too much to saute the vegetables. Okay, now that my oil is nice and hot, I'm going to add in my onions. Rinse my hands off here. Onion hands all over everything. And I'm going to grab about a tablespoon of minced garlic. I like to use the jars of garlic from the grocery store, but you can use fresh. It's totally whatever your preference is. And we're going to saute this up just until the onions are a little translucent. You want them cooked, but you don't want them to be, you don't really want too much color on them, so you're not really trying to brown them up or anything like that. Just soften them. Okay, my squash is out of the oven now, and I'm letting that cool. I'm going to go ahead and add the mushrooms in now that my onions are all softened up. Stir this up. You can add other seasonings too, if you like, for this. Some like seasoned salt would be okay, or like a complete seasoning, like the Veggie complete. That would be really good in here. Just plain salt and pepper. Okay, now that those are kind of cooked down a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and add in the broccoli. It's all sauteed up in here. Okay, so everything's kind of cooked now. I am going to put a lid on this. And I don't have a lid that fits this pan, but okay. So after leaving the lid on for a little bit and letting the broccoli kind of steam, I allowed it to cool for a little bit in the pan. I'm just going to go ahead and get it all into a bowl now. And don't mind me, I don't like to waste anything, so I'm going to get as much out of this pan as I can. Okay, I'm going to allow that to cool for a little bit on the counter while I get a spoon to scrape out my squash and a fork. Okay, so I'm using a paper towel to do this because my squash is still a little hot, and you kind of want it to be warm while you're doing this, but not too hot. So you want to scrape out some of the inside, but not all of it. You don't want to scrape it all the way down to the skin, because then you're going to use the squash as a bowl, and you don't want it to be too flimsy that it doesn't hold together. Okay, so same thing with this one. You just kind of scrape it out. Don't get too close to the skin, like I said, because you don't want your bowl to become too flimsy that it won't hold together and hold anything when you stuff it. Just like you would a potato skin. Okay, so I've got about a block of softened cream cheese. And I'm going to mix all this together. Again, if you haven't added any seasonings at this point, you could add salt and pepper, anything that you'd like to taste. I don't really add anything else into this, but okay. So I'm going to add about, I don't know, a good nice size handful of cheddar cheese. You could do mozzarella, you could do any kind of cheese, provolone, anything like that. And I'm also going to use a couple scoops of sour cream. Not too much. I don't know what you'd call it, maybe a third of a cup. Okay, we're going to go ahead and mix this up. You could add some nutritional yeast in at this point. That's always good. So that's about it. We're gonna stuff our shells. So we're gonna go ahead and spoon this back into our squash boats. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and add on some more cheddar cheese on the top. We do like a lot of cheese in our house, so I'm going to use a good amount. But again, you can adapt to how much cheese you like. You don't even have to put cheese on it if you don't like. Okay, and I'm going to turn the oven back on to about 400 degrees. Okay, so these cooked in the oven at 400 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to show you guys here. The cheese is all nice and melted and browned up. Everything is nice and heated all the way through. We're going to serve it up and plate it. This is what it looks like when it's all plated up. The cheese is melted. The filling is all nice and gooey and creamy. And that's it, you guys. Enjoy!